everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. We have Bruce Tulgan here again, and he has a new research report called The Voice of Generation Z. So we're going to find out all about this, I guess, a new generation. I just heard about Generation Z. So welcome, Bruce.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me back. I'm delighted to talk with you again.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about what prompted the report and what Generation Z, what ages Generation Z covers.
Yeah, well, look, we've been trying to keep our finger on the pulse of the new emerging workforce for 25 years now. So there's always new young people, and it's always kind of a work in progress trying to figure out when one generation ends and another generation begins. So we've been tracking the Millennials, those born after Generation X, but the oldest Millennials are going to turn 41 this year.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So we've been also looking at when does the millennial generation end? And I think we split the millennials into two groups, the first wave millennials and the second wave millennials. So what we've been really trying to do here is figure out when does the post-millennial generation begin? Mm-hmm. And that's what this is about. So Pew, the research organization, released a report in last spring in which they claim that the last birth year of the millennials is 1996. So what we did is this summer, we interviewed 4,093 young people born 1997 and later. And that is the basis of this report. It appeared, some of the findings were referenced in a Wall Street Journal cover story, actually, called Ready, Set, Strive. Get ready for Gen Z. That was the cover story in the Wall Street Journal. So it's a moving target when each generation ends and when the next one begins. But we're looking here at the post-millennial generation, and we're using as a working definition those born 1997 and later.
Okay, so what did you find relative, now that you have this new group? So I think my two sons are, one's 1999 and the other is 2001, so they would be defined as Generation Z.
Yeah.
They're currently 17 and 19.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit about how Generation Z, because you've done a ton of research on millennials, how are they different than millennials?
Well, it's more like an evolution of the same story. Some of the factors are continuing: globalization and technology, institutions in a state of constant flux, individuals feeling like they're going to have to rely on themselves to succeed, information tidal wave fueling everything, the pace of change accelerating, immediacy becoming the only time frame that's real. All this is continuing. And even the helicopter parenting on steroids, the handheld supercomputers attached to the brain. The second wave millennials, the youngest millennials, are continuing into this new generation. There's a lot of the same trends, but what Generation Z seems to be reflecting the fact that they've come of age in an era of uncertainty. Rather than sort of coming of age in the 90s when everything was great, they came of age in the 2000s when everything was very uncertain. Instead of peace and prosperity of the 90s, it was war and fear of terrorism and economic turmoil, fear of environmental collapse. So there's a lot about this post-millennial generation that's very plugged into the uncertainty of today's environment. In some ways, they're like children of the 1930s, growing up, and we're not at war in the way of World War II, but we've been at war for 17 years now. And there hasn't been a worldwide depression, thank goodness, but there has been a huge amount of economic uncertainty. Fear of environmental collapse, of course. So it's like they're children of the 1930s, if children of the 1930s had grown up learning how to think, learn, and communicate while attached to handheld supercomputers. and, and if they were raised by helicopter parents on steroids.
Okay, so there's this kind of imminent risk that's kind of out there all the time, war, environmental decline, and this tech. And so how does that show up in when they show up at work? How are they different than millennials when they show up at work?
Well, they have an acute sense of seeking some kind of security. Now, that may not mean paying their dues and climbing the ladder the old-fashioned way. It may mean that free agent mindset that seemed to emerge first with Generation X and then strengthen along the time span of the millennial generation. And maybe it's even stronger now, this free agent mindset in today's gig economy fueled by supersonic technology. But they do seem to have a sense that they need to worry about their future and that they need to take care of themselves, and that their working lives and careers are going to be an important part of that. Whether or not they feel they can rely on institutions, they're very much focused on self-reliance. But one of the things that was probably the big headline for us was this digital generation. The most important thing to them, they say, in a work experience is the human element.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I'm shocked.
Yeah, for us, the biggest headline was that the digital generation, the most important thing to them is the human element after all. And number one thing they care about is supportive leadership at work. The number two thing they care about is relationships with other individuals at work. After that, of course, it's flexible work schedules. So that one is no surprise. But what we thought was notable was this emphasis on supportive leadership and relationships at work.
And did they define exactly what that meant for them?
Well, there's a lot of data, of course, that we're tracking that was part of this particular study and also ancillary to this study. They were looking for leaders who don't leave them wasting their time going in the wrong direction. They're looking for leaders who help them hit the ground running. They're looking for leaders who try to set them up for success by giving them the tools they need and clear expectations. They're looking for leaders who give them clear feedback on an ongoing basis so they know how they're doing and how they can get better. They're looking for leaders who are willing to spend the time helping them earn more of what they need and want. They don't want everything on a silver platter. One of the most unfair stereotypes about this new generation is they want everything handed to them on a silver platter. We don't see that at all, but do want leaders who are willing to do business with them.
Okay, so one of the things when you say that they want things on the silver platter, there's just this reputation that millennials are very privileged and they want to be like, I want to be the VP yesterday, and that kind of thing. Is that changing, or is that still the same?
Well, the post-millennials, I think, are still suffering from that stereotype that young people have been subjected to over the last number of years. And it is true that they don't look at careers and say, I know what I'll do. I'll hitch my wagon to the star of this established organization. I'll pay my dues and climb the ladder the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
Sink or swim, that'll be fine. Reinvent the wheel, okay, sign me up. Break a few eggs, work all night, and maybe nobody's noticing. They're not into that. Right. But
that hasn't changed.
Right. But that doesn't mean they want everything handed to them on a silver platter.
Okay, got it. So you said the biggest aha was that, and how they're dramatically different, is that they're seeking relationships. So they're looking for supportive bosses. And what kind of relationships do they want at work?
Well, again, they're not looking to go to work and make a bunch of friends. Not that they're against that. But what they want is to work with colleagues whom they respect, from whom they can learn, people who are on the same page, people who are into the work, people who are willing to support them and back them up, learn from them and help them out. What they want is, what they're looking for is a workplace in which they can have some kind of esprit de corps with their coworkers. And that may be young people who are in their same age cohort, but they're also looking basically for the same thing among people who are older and more experienced. They don't want to be humored, and they don't want to be treated like the kid. They want to be taken seriously.
Well, it's interesting because so my kids have been raised in the era, and I'm not even sure the chicken or the egg, like how this came about, but when they were in middle school all the way up to high school, they always did group work. So it was like getting together and doing works as a team. And so they're kind of all organized. I mean, that's how they've been raised since they were, in middle school. So that's what they're expecting when they go to work, where some jobs are really not like that, or maybe some industries haven't been that way. But do you see industries responding to these new Generation Z and the I guess the millennial do you see corporations responding to these new needs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that employers are looking at young people and saying, gee, where are you coming from? Now we need to reorganize our workplace to accommodate you. But I do think that the trend among young workers, which is in alignment with what you say, that they're used to working in collaborative teams, and that something that they prefer to do at work, at least they want that to be part of their experience at work, working interdependently with collaborative teams. This does dovetail with a larger trend in the workplace, the interdependency revolution, in which people are working in cross-functional teams more and more and more, without a clear chain of command always. Sometimes it's in what business leaders and managers would hope would be self-managed teams. My view is there's no such thing as a self-managed team.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, give me 5 minutes with a self-managed team. I'll tell you who's in charge of that team. The only question is it the person who should be in charge, or is it a ringleader who seized control? Right. But there is this interdependency revolution sweeping across the workplace in every industry, and people of all ages now, more and more, are working in cross-functional teams with people who are dotted line from them, or in lateral roles, or in different departments in lateral roles. So there's a huge amount of increase now in the need to be able to collaborate. And that requires more relationship savvy. It requires more communication skill. And I think people of all ages are sort of trying to adapt to that. But I do think, to your point, that a lot of younger, less experienced people, they're used to this from their schooling.
Yeah. So what's the business need that's driving these interdependency? I think of it like as interdisciplinary, but like what's driving that new work configuration?
Well, there's always been interdependency in the workplace, right? It's always been the case that the salespeople might want to talk to engineering to understand what's so cool about this new product, right? Or shipping might want to talk to sales and find out what's coming around the corner. Accounting has to talk to everyone, right, to make sure they're doing their expense reports, or that dotting their I's and crossing their T's. There's always been interdependent communication that's been necessary. Right. A lot of that has happened in the past at higher levels, among the leader level, and now it's pushed down the chain of command more and more. That's one. And why is this happening? I think it's speed of execution. It's the transformation of communication technology makes more interdependent communication possible. Competition makes the speed of execution more necessary. I think what's happened is that business leaders and management experts have realized that cooperating earlier and more often leads to better planning, less waste, taking into account, it makes sense if the engineers talk to production before they finish designing a product, make sure that the manufacturing team is going to be able to manufacture this thing the engineers are coming up with. And, you need to talk to purchasing to make sure that the cost of goods sold isn't going to go up too high because the way the engineers designed it requires, very expensive parts that are only available from one supplier or a limited number of suppliers, right? So this has always been true. It's just that it happened at a higher level and it moved a lot more slowly in the past.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a nephew that works at Boeing, and he's been saying that, right now, like the way that engineering, it used to be kind of like a handover and then they kind of connect sometimes, maybe not even that well with each other. But now the finance person's in there and like looking designs and looking iteratively at if they change this model, if they change a CAD to look like this, what are the materials and resources associated? How is that going to get them to time to market faster? And then similarly at Amazon, so that's at Boeing. And then similarly at Amazon, it seems like they have these cross-functional teams where the finance person is crunching the numbers. And so someone has this great business idea and the person's like asking them questions and someone's typing in financial numbers and then everyone is at the table. And I kind of remember when we were at Microsoft, we started, whenever we did a launch, we would have that kind of interdependency and, constant like connecting before we were marching towards launch. And then it kind of like, as we got bigger and bigger, those things just kind of like faded away. They happened less and less. But I understand that. I get the time to market thing. So seeking security, then, I want to go back to that. So they have a free agent mindset. Did you say they have a free agent mindset or they don't have a free agent mindset?
Look, I think people of all ages more and more realize that you can't rely on established institutions to be the anchors of your success and security. That if you're not taking care of yourself and your family, you better be a little bit worried about who's going to take care of yourself and your family. So I think that, this free agent mindset is sweeping across the workforce among people of all ages. The biggest difference with the youngest, least experienced people is they're not experiencing this as a change. Right? It's this
is just the way it is.
Yeah, they've never known it any other way.
Yeah.
And I think people are not free agents because they're disloyal or they have short attention spans or they're out for themselves. People are free agents because they have no other choice. And the youngest people, they've never known it any other way.
Yeah. It seems like so long ago, but I was talking to a dear friend of mine who she's 85 and she worked in I don't even know where she worked, but she has this phenomenal insurance. They my mom, I was asking her, are you okay? And she's like, oh yeah, my company would put money away for me so that I'd had health care associated, so like all my health care was paid by my company. And when Dad died, some of his health care benefits from P&G like came over to me. So I have like all these health benefits. And I was like, oh my God, like that just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
exactly. It didn't happen. It exists for me. And these younger kids, they don't even expect. It's like, what? Like, you're lucky you get health care. And if you do, you still have huge co-payments and all these other things. But the kinds of things that are my parents and maybe a little bit below that, the kind of benefits that they got in terms of more security for your health, 401ks, those were there. I don't even know now, do most companies have 401ks and what's happening with respect to security?
I think that many employers still provide 401k contributions, but even 401ks, what that is of course a provision of the tax code that allows individuals to control their own retirement account and based on tax qualification requirements, and companies do participate in that. And of course, they're governed by the tax code also in terms of what they can do. But But that's in distinction to the old system, which was a pension that was
Right.
rooted in a particular tenure in a particular organization.
Right. Yeah, where you got just stock for just being there.
Or yeah, and you got a pension plan that,
Right.
over X amount of years in, you were participating in a pension plan, and the way a pension plan works is like an annuity. Then, once you retire, they start paying you, and that is increasingly rare.
Right. Right. So they're not even expecting security because it never was offered to them. But what is
Yeah,
it? So,
or
but
another way to put it is that what is security now?
yeah,
Right? Security used to be
yeah,
your
that's a good question.
you
Yeah.
hitch your wagon to the star of an established organization, and you pay your dues, you climb the ladder, you make lots of short-term sacrifices. In the long run, the system in that organization is going to take care of you in the long run.
Right.
That was the old model. I think what security looks like now, it's very self-based security. So you see, maybe the younger boomers and the Gen Xers and the older millennials suffered through the transition, the transformation. But the Gen Zers are coming of age in the post-job security era. What is security to them? It's more like a self-based career security.
Hmm.
It's what are the marketable skills that you're learning? What are the broad transferable skills that you're developing?
Mm,
Relationships with decision makers you're developing, the inside and outside the organization, people who know you're valuable, people who know that they will come to you, and that you have this kind of beyond networking, but that relationships that outlive any relationship you might have with a particular institution, tangible results with your name on it, proof of your ability to add value. Uh,
wow.
yourself, your own mind, body, spirit, so that what security becomes is a self-based security. It's like
Mm,
yourself Inc. And then
yeah.
you know,
Oh, totally makes sense because there's all this stuff out there, you're like, what's your personal brand? And and now I understand, and it generates from this whole Facebook thing where I have a Facebook presence. What is your presence? What's your brand presence? What does it stand for? How many people are connected to you when you're part of that brand? So it's it's congruent with the types of technologies that this generation grew up in, right? I mean,
yeah. I think it's again, I'm not sure if these trends have emerged in dovetail. Certainly, the social media environment of individual atomization, but also complete networked connectivity, right?
right,
So we're all alone, but we're connected to everyone.
right.
Uh, it's
You're on your own. You have to figure it out, but you're connected. So it's about those connections. That makes
Yeah,
sense
I
to
mean,
me.
we're in our own little cocoons, atomized here with our handheld supercomputer, but we're connected to everybody all over the world.
Yeah.
So so it does, I think, align with that reality, and surely people growing up being shaped by this social media environment, that has to have a lot to do with how people's expectations and style and behavioral trends overall. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's this kind of support me, tell me what, give me some clear structures and take care of me. But then I'm on my own. I mean, it's a very interesting kind
Right.
of tension between relationships and what they want from their boss, but then also like technology. Like my son will say, I don't need you to help me do that. I'll just watch a YouTube video. I'm like, okay, like what's the purpose of being a parent nowadays? It's like your kids are watching YouTube videos on how to do everything. So how does that, because you said that, that you said rightfully so that the kids are walking around with supercomputers on, and are kind of like their whole life is oriented around that. How did that show up in the report? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course, that is part of the reality. And that, that's the go-to finding, right? For us, what was interesting was how much the human element still matters to them.
Yeah.
Now, what they don't want to get from the human element is stuff you can easily learn with a supercomputer. If you can navigate through a menu-driven information system and get to easy answers to open questions, if you can get resources, which increasingly there are learning resources available on a whole range of matters. What they tend to want from human beings is something they can't get from the computer, whether that's the lessons of experience, context, wisdom, support, that kind of human connection is still very, very important, even though they also don't like having human beings try to teach them things they can just as easily learn from a computer. And to your point, more and more and more with YouTube instructional videos, there are more and more things you can find answers to by following a menu-driven information system into a worldwide network of information.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard because I'm thinking about the contrast of myself versus my kids. If I have a customer service problem, I'll start looking through the help menus in Amazon or wherever, and then I'm like, oh, screw it. What's the 800 number? And then I want to talk to a human being. Whereas my kids are really like, why don't you just like type in the terms and see? I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot be bothered. But they'll go through all of that,
Right.
and go through the process because they're okay with the time and energy because they would rather navigate the menus. I'm like, oh my God, it's going to save me more time if I just talk to a human being. And in their minds, that's just ridiculous because it's not going to save me more time. And it's like, why wouldn't you just independently go figure stuff out on your own? Like, I don't want to be bothered. So that's
Yeah, I mean, in that case, I think, most young people would say, you're still using a tool, you're just using a very inefficient tool.
right. Oh, you mean like why I couldn't get to, the answer in Amazon
Well, no, you're still using a tool by trying to use a person on the other end of a telephone.
oh, I see.
Their tool works a lot better because it's a computer.
I see. Which I don't think that way. Okay, so it's just a mindset difference. And then the other thing was I was talking to my son, and he said, I don't need these instructional videos sometimes give them this false sense of actually knowing what they're doing, and they really don't. Those videos are as good as the people making them, some of whom are excellent, right? Like the two of us creating this video, right? We're excellent. But then some of the stuff out there, I'm like, I don't really know. And they don't tell. So, for example, I was working with a millennial who was creating a small business plan. And she came up with a small business plan, and she had seen she had signed up for, a class where it's like, come up with a business plan in 5 steps or less. And she went through this whole business plan. And I looked at it and I was like, I don't understand, like, who's your target audience? Usually the marketing is about, either retention, attraction, it's like attracting people, educate. There's a whole cycle for marketing. And she's like, what? And I said, well, didn't they teach you this in your marketing video? And she said, no. And she was like furiously scribbling down these things as if these are words of wisdom. I'm like, this is just like basic marketing 101. She's like, well, they didn't tell me that in the video. And this is like a really popular video. Yeah. So there's this kind of false sense that because I see it on a video. So I don't know how to get around that.
I mean, look, what a lot of people, I wrote a book called Bridging the Soft Skills Gap, How to Teach the Missing Basics to Today's Young Talent. Mm-hmm. And bear in mind, I'm somebody who's going around advocating and trying to explain what young people bring to the table and how valuable it is. But nobody sees in their own blind spots.
Right.
And what you're pointing to is a blind spot that many young people have when you grow up in an information environment where there is a worldwide network of information available to you at your fingertips. Sometimes you might have gaps in vetting information. Mm-hmm. You might have gaps in being able to evaluate the various quality of one source of information versus another.
Right.
And one of the things that we take on in Bridging the Soft Skills Gap is how to teach critical thinking to today's young people. And there's there's three components. It's not just problem solving, right? Problem solving is just one component of critical thinking. So what we teach is the first part of critical thinking is foundational learning, that you still have to do the long, slow, patient foundation building.
Right.
Just-in-time learning is filling a skill or knowledge gap that's preventing you from achieving a tangible result in real time. But it's sort of like learning the alphabet, and when you get to Q and you run out, you go to R. But no, you have to start with A. You don't start at QRS.
Right.
And so they don't realize they're starting in the middle of the story.
Right.
Right. It's sort of the rule of how much could there be to this? Usually a whole lot more than it seems.
Right.
That's true about almost everything.
Right.
So when you're looking at something from the outside, so the first element that we teach in critical thinking is building a foundation, foundational learning. That before you can think critically, you have to know something to think about, right? You have to know some facts before you can think critically about them. So you need to build a foundation of knowledge. That's step one. Step two is learning repeatable solutions to recurring problems. So often when you have a problem, it's not a matter of first impression. Almost always it's a problem that other people have tackled more than once before. Not only that, but lots of folks have tried to tackle that problem, enough so that there's some ways that are better than other ways. There are established best practices for solving that problem. And these are what we call repeatable solutions to recurring problems. And often, on top of the foundational knowledge, learning repeatable solutions to common recurring problems is the next piece. Then and only then do you get to what a lot of people think about as critical thinking, which is decision making, where you might make a list of pros and cons, or if you have a matter of first impression, you have to find some way to dig into a question that's a matter of first impression. Often the best way is to make reference to your foundational knowledge and see if you can do some extrapolating. Make reference to the repeatable solutions to a problem that's similar. Try to extrapolate. Then you start to say, oh, well, maybe I would have this kind of solution, do the pros and cons. Maybe I would have this kind of solutions, do the pros and cons. But if it's an iterative process, if it's a little bit off from a proven solution that you've already mastered, you're so much in better territory. So when you look at a video to learn something, if you already have some foundational knowledge, if you've tackled similar problems and studied proven repeatable solutions to similar problems, you're going to be in a much better position to see whether this video is a good one or not.
Right. Yes, that's interesting. That's what a perfect way, what an articulate and very good way of describing critical thinking. Thank you. So let's go back to the report. What are some other kind of ahas? So there was the kind of how they're different and that they're super conscious about risk, how they're seeking security, maybe more so because they were grown up in this kind of risky environment, and that they care about relationships, which it seems like did millennials care about relationships too? It seems like, did they or not?
Yes, but what we see is that the top two factors, what we asked young people was, what would be the most important thing to you that would indicate your satisfaction in a job? What are the things that would matter the most to you? Factors in a job. And the top two items were supportive leadership and relationships with their coworkers.
Wow, that is shocking.
Yeah.
Like, what were some of them in the past, like a pay, or like what were the things?
Yeah, so performance-based pay, for example, which scores lower among Gen Zers than we expected it to. A proportionate quid pro quo for your effort, right? performance-based pay. We expected flexible work conditions to be high on the list, but we expected it to be higher on the list. Good digital tools and technology was on the list, but we expected it to be higher on the list. And so for us, the big takeaway was that the human element scored so high.
Yeah.
And so important to them to have leaders who knew who they were, cared enough to provide support, guidance, direction, set them up for success. That was something that we were really excited to see. They want to learn marketable skills that will make them valuable where they go. They're comfortable doing grunt work, but they want to know, what do I need to do to earn a more interesting set of tasks and responsibilities? Yes, they're looking for autonomy at work, but more important, they want clear direction when it comes to things not up to them. Don't pretend something's up to me when it's not.
Right. Yeah, don't give me the sense of like, well, what do you think? It doesn't matter because ultimately I'm going to do what I think. Right.
Yeah, or by all means, tell me, hey, take a crack at it, do it however you think it should be done, but only if it's really up to me, not if you're going to come back hours later, days later, or weeks later and say, what are you doing? Didn't you know? This isn't up to you. We have a checklist for this.
Right. Interesting. So what are some of the things that, in the last couple minutes, for people who are listening to this, what would you say are some takeaways that you would say if you're a company owner or, you're employing this new Gen Z? What are things, your top kind of recommendations?
Yeah, the number one thing is do not listen to the hype that this is a generation that wants to be humored at work. They do not want to be humored. They want to be taken seriously. They know that every minute that they are working on a job is their chance to invest in their career security, even if it's self-based career security. And just because they don't want to pay their dues and climb the ladder the old-fashioned way does not mean that there is a lack of work ethic. They have a sense that long-term vesting rewards are very uncertain, and so they want to know today, tomorrow, this week, what do you want from me? What do you have to offer me? That they do not want everything handed to them on a silver platter. They are willing to work hard to earn what they want. They do not want to be left alone. They want guidance, direction, and support. They do not want to go to work and have a playground with their best friend. Come to work whenever you feel like it. Bring your dog. Right. That is a fiction. They'll go home and hang out with their friends and do their own thing. When they're at work, they want someone who's taking them seriously, is setting them up for success, is making it very clear to them what's up to them and what's not. Of course, they'd like as much flexibility as they can. Of course, they'd like more responsibility, more autonomy. Of course, they'd like to do the interesting tasks. But they will dig ditches all day, every day, for as long as they need to if there's somebody helping them make sure that the expectations are clear, that somebody's keeping score for them, that they know that they're contributing to their own self-based career security.
So going back to the keeping score, I'm imagining with this interdependence, it used to be that you have a boss, you directly report to your boss knew everything that you were doing, but then in this world where there's more autonomy, there's these cross-functional teams in which, your performance is kind of related to how well you work with these teams. Is it 360s that's the solution for that? Like, how does someone get amply rewarded for the work that they've done?
Yeah, I think that's one way. My advice to young people in our career seminars and my advice to their managers in our management seminars is get young people involved in keeping score for themselves. Get people keeping success notebooks. Get people keeping idea notebooks. Get people keeping continuous improvement notebooks so that they're keeping track of how they're using their time. They're keeping track of how many widgets they're making, how many shovels full of dirt they're digging. They're keeping track of the incoming requests they're getting from lateral colleagues, their outgoing requests to lateral colleagues. They're keeping track of the relationships they're building, the marketable skills they're learning, the tangible results they're collecting, or the contributions they're making. Get people to start keeping track for themselves. And even if they have a lot of this cross-functional interdependency, which most people do more and more and more, make sure, my advice to young people is, make sure you're engaged in a regular, ongoing one-on-one dialogue with your immediate leader, manager, supervisor. And that's a great time to go over your own scorekeeping, to show your immediate boss, I'm keeping track of what I'm doing. Keeping a time log of how I'm spending my time. I'm keeping a log of what I'm learning, what I'm getting better at, what I'm getting done, who I'm serving. So the complexity of today's environment is it's not like, oh, now you don't have a boss. You still have a boss who's giving you all kinds of tasks, responsibilities, and projects all the time. And you're being inundated by requests from all your lateral colleagues, many of whom are in different departments or different parts of the country or the world, people you may not even know. But somehow they're coming to you because of the particular role you're supposed to be playing. So in today's environment where you have tons of incoming requests, you still have your day job working for your immediate boss, lots of getting your own job done requires relying on people in lateral roles. My advice is, find a really good way to keep track of yourself, keep score for yourself. You come in, you have a cup of coffee, you turn on your computer, keep track of what you're doing. Start keeping a diary almost.
Right. Yeah, if you're successful, it's kind of like almost like a resume list of the things that you've done. Because I guess what I'm hearing is, as I track this logic, if you're all about like you're a free agent, it means that you actually have to be able to market all the things that you've done. So if you aren't really good at keeping track of these things and articulating them, you're kind of in a tricky position. So I can see these success notebooks as being critical in actually creating the narrative about what you've done and marketing it to other people.
Yeah, I mean, look, the more it's not as complex as it sounds. Just keep a diary every day and organize it by time. How are you using your time? This is a great self-reference tool so that you can be rigorous with yourself in your own self-evaluation. How am I using my time? Where am I wasting time? How am I staying focused on priorities? It's a great tool for reporting up to your immediate leader, manager, supervisor. So when at the end of the day, you say, where did my day go? Right. And then when you talk to your own leader, manager, supervisor, it's so much easier to give an account of how you're spending your time.
Yeah. It's like I'm spending like X% of time, handling incoming requests from different cross-functional teams. They'll be like, really? That much? You're like, yeah.
That's right. Exactly. And so you're able to share with your own boss how you're spending your time. You also have a tool to help track the deliverables you promise to your lateral colleagues, the deliverables they promise to you. Now, I'm old-fashioned. I'm thinking of an actual notebook, but there may be, of course, the Gen Zers, have a holographic notebook or something that captures all the data in 4 dimensions.
Yeah, they're like dictating it into their phone as they're walking along and doing who knows what. All right, so I want to ask. We have a couple minutes left. I wanted to ask about the helicoptering parenting and how that factors into this generation. And is it the same as the millennials? Is it different? Or, how does that factor into the work environment and the children that you see, these young adults you see?
I think it dovetails with the helicopter parenting on steroids that we were seeing with the second wave millennials. I think one way to think about it is the first wave millennials grew up maybe in the 90s. Everything was great, peace and prosperity. Everything's going to be great. Magical business models, a foosball table in every teaming space.
Right.
And along the way, their parents were telling them, whatever you think, say, or do is just great. All styles are equally valid. Everyone gets a trophy. It's more important to feel like a winner than win. We're all winners. I think, but by the time you get to Gen Z, what you have is the kind of parenting, it's almost like investment parenting, cultivation parenting, that it's not enough to tell your kids that they're winning, that we want to try to give them every advantage so that they start out the game with points scored. We're trying to give them an actual advantage. We're not just going to tell them they're winners so they feel like winners. We're going to help them win. So I think it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of a sense that the world is complex and dangerous, and this is serious business. But I think as a result of this, young people are accustomed to having older, more experienced people in positions of supervisory responsibility and authority who take them seriously and who spend time guiding, directing, supporting them. So when they get to work and there's an older, more experienced person in charge who's sort of like, hey, figure it out, kids, sink or swim, reinvent the wheel, best of luck. Nobody held my hand. And what they're looking at you and thinking, bad grown up. You shouldn't be in charge of anyone, much less me. Older, more experienced people who are in charge are supposed to set me up for success and build me up, not tell me best of luck, kid. So I think that it makes sense that the trajectory of parenting, teaching, counseling. Remember, many of them are coming out of the academy where there's a very strong in loco parentis mindset again in colleges and universities. And so the authority figures who are in adult authority figures are doing a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to supporting young people. So when they get to the workplace, it's very puzzling to them.
Yeah, like what happened to all these wonderful, loving, supporting people who were trying to invest in me and had faith in me and wanted me to do all these wonderful things?
Exactly.
Wow, that's interesting.
Kid, figure it out. And what I always tell young people is, well, the difference here is in school, you were paying them, so you were the customer.
Right.
Now they're paying you. Right. So, but be that as it may, most young people are like, yeah, but it's your company. I just got here. Isn't it irresponsible of you to just say, figure it out? Shouldn't you be telling me what to do, how to do it? There's got to be a good orientation. There's got to be good up-to-speed training. There's got to be more hands-on supportive leadership.
Yeah. Don't you have your act together? It's funny because my son went to he did a startup and he's like, I just can't stand this. It seems like they're just running around being inefficient all the time. Hasn't someone written down how to do this? Like, doesn't anyone have any experience doing any of this? Doesn't seem like it.
And in a startup, it's to be expected. More so you might expect this in a startup. But when they go to an established organization, especially, they find it very puzzling when those who are supposed to be in charge of them are like, well, figure it out. Nobody held my hand. To them, this is a very bad sign.
My son is so used to that, I think, that he's fine, but he has a certain type of personality where he doesn't necessarily require structure. Okay, tell me about the classes. So it sounds like you do classes for college students. Is that right?
Well, no, if colleges hire us, I'm always happy to do them. Yeah. But I did a book years ago called Career Skills for the New Economy, and we have a book called It's Okay to Manage Your Boss. And then there's Bridging the Soft Skills Gap. So often employers will bring us in to do seminars for employees either on soft skills or on career skills or on what I call boss managing. But I think, as you know, primarily our training programs are mostly aimed at teaching leaders, managers, and supervisors how to lead, manage, and supervise. But often we'll come in and do the other side of the equation as well.
Yeah. So then if folks are interested in having you come to their organization, what's the first step? Well,
go to rainmakerthinking.com. That's probably the best step. Nose around on our website. Send us an email. I'm at brucet@rainmakerthinking.com. Send me an email, and I type faster than I talk. I'll always respond. And and if there's something I can do, then we'll see what we can do to help.
Thank you so much for being here. What an interesting report. Thank you so much again for being here. Always enjoy your coming over to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.